Hey everybody, Riot Mort here, and it is time for the patch 1420 rundown. We are in the back half of the set. We're getting towards the end, towards the big serious competitions, things like that, and so we're trying to make sure the set is as balanced as possible. What we've seen so far on live is that the meta has definitely shifted into late game, a lot around Arcana, Preserver, and Fairy. So 4 costs, very dominated 4 costs. That being said, we're not going to balance Thrash here. We're way too late in the set. But this patch is a lot of what I'm going to call micro changes. You're going to see a lot of changes, but they're all very, very tiny. So we don't actually expect things to change a ton, but we'll go over it as we go into it. The other thing is I'm trying something different this rundown. I'm grouping up the large and the small changes by the section. So hopefully that will make you not go, wait, they're not nerfing this, and then we'll get to it quicker. So let's see how it goes and jump into it. All right, on the system side, the golems are all being buffed. Their HP is going up, their armor is going up. This is mostly because support golem 2 is being nerfed very heavily, which will allow us to buff all the golems. So support golem 2 will now be a lot weaker. We'll talk about that later, but golems ended up stronger. The unit star up combined ceremony is now instant. This is mostly relevant when you're 3-starring a champion at the last second. We talked about this 2 patches ago. We pulled it out because we thought it was causing a bug. It wasn't. So now we can put it back in safely. This is in. Sweet. Okay, this one's really niche, but I want to call this one out. When looking for the strongest champions, if 2 champs are the same character and have the same number of items, the higher star copy will always be the strongest. What this is referring to is let's say you're playing 2 tanky Nunu and in a Honeymancer comp, and you have 3 items on the 3-star Nunu, and then the 2-star Nunu, you put a 3rd item on, well, it'll instantly be the most recent, and beforehand would become the strongest, which is what you don't want. So this prevents that. It's like I said, it's a niche case, but we're handling it to make sure it just doesn't, you never really ever want that to be the case. So that has been dealt with. And then finally, we made a change to one of the portals. Let them cook kind of devolved into pray for a Reforger, use the Reforger on the frying pan or the spatula to have 2 of them, and then just get 2 portal emblems or 2 whatever emblems. Kind of defeated the purpose of the portal. So we've changed it. It is now make them cook. Same thing, you start with a spatula and a frying pan, but Reforgers will not drop. It is impossible to get a Reforger on this portal. You cannot get a Reforger. You cannot get Pandora's items. It will not change. I've tried telling my stream this. They didn't get it. They kept asking questions about it, but I'm telling you, there are no Reforgers. So it will force you to cook. Now you can just slam it for that quick tactician's items, or you can cook. So should be pretty fun. All right, on the traits side, these are the large changes. Like I said, Arcana has kind of been one of the 3 dominant things that you see at the end game right now. So we're going to be hitting pretty much all of Arcana. You could debate that the Xerath wasn't really necessary, but we don't want every game's end game to just be how much Arcana can you get. That being said, these aren't big swings. For example, Tahm Kench's HP went from 75 to 65. It's still going to be good, right? We're not trying to balance Thrash these out of the meta, but they are going to be nerfed. So Hecarim AD at 4 and 5 gets nerfed. Tahm Kench HP at 4 and 5 gets nerfed. Yeah, we're not even nerfing the 3, so you can still play that. And then Xerath true damage being nerfed at the 3, the 4, and the 5. So, yeah. Bastion. Bastion has been something that is basically unplayable past 2. This is one of our bigger swings. The 4-piece is getting 5 more armor and MR. The 6-piece is getting 25 more armor and MR. And the 8-piece should actually be a playable comp. Literally just won with it on stream last game. But 200 armor and MR, this thing should be tough to deal with. We do want Bastion to be something that is playable, so it's getting buffed. Eldridge, this is another one that we're trying to buff up a bit as well. The AP per star level, this should be red. It is a nerf. The star scaling on Eldridge is actually secretly OP. Not many people have figured this out, but if you can somehow get 3-star Ashe, 3-star Elise, 3-star Syndra, 3-star Neela, and then hit 7 Eldridge, it's actually insane. But because of that, we're going to lower the amount of AP it gets so that we can buff it elsewhere. And so the buffs here, 3-piece is getting buffed at every stage, so Eldridge should be a stronger opener. 5-piece is getting some pretty massive buffs here. If you look at the stage 4 and stage 5 numbers, they went from 1.6 1.75 to 2, 2.5. This means 5 Eldritch is going to have a lot more HP in the late game. So if you're stuck at 5 Eldritch for a little while, it won't be as detrimental. And then the 7-piece actually doesn't need as big a buff. It's still getting some extra HP as well, but 7 Eldritch is actually pretty good. And so our goal here is buff the things that get you to 7 Eldritch with a little more power, and it should be pretty playable here. So hopefully Eldritch ends up being playable. Mage. Mage, we did some calculations, and 3 Mage is actually like really bad for a trait. And Mage has been kind of struggling all set, with the exception of the patch where you could play like the Vagar Vex line. And even then, you mostly played 5 Mage. You didn't really play 7 Mage. So Mage is going to get a buff here. 3 Mage is going to go to 85. 5 is going to go to 100. And 7 is going to go to 125. Now, I will say from my PBE testing, Mages look a little strong. So we're going to, if they end up too strong, we will react very quickly. But calling it out that like there is a little bit of risk here, but we want Mages to be another playable line. So calling that out, calling the shot. We'll see where they end up. Portal. Portal is another trait that actually is pretty strong, and you might be wondering why it needs buffs. But the problem with Portal is that it falls off a cliff. If you have 8 Portal going into stage 5, it'll fall off really, really hard. And so specifically what we're buffing here is the things that actually scale with your army strength, so that your army will be a bit stronger, but without buffing like the Portal bombs or the Portal units. So here, what you're getting is the Jarvan standard that comes out will give more attack speed at 3 and 5. And again, more attack speed with a bunch of bad units isn't going to help. But if you've got, good equipped units, this should be nice. And the snacks heal at 6 and 8 will also get buffed. They'll heal more % of your units. And again, if they're healing itemless units, that's not very good. But this should be a small buff to help Portal scale up at the 6 and the 8. All right, more large ones. Fairy. Fairy's in a weird spot right now. Fairy's very frustrating to fight against. If you've ever fought a Rakan 2, Callista 1, and that Rakan just never dies, and you're like, guess I'll die, because Rakan certainly isn't. But that being said, the Fairy vertical is actually not that good. So you're seeing a pretty big power shift here. Fairy 3 and 5 are going to lose some HP, so it's harder to get to that spot. But when you hit 7, you're going to get a little bit more HP. Seems fair. When you have 7 or 9, again, trying to reward the vertical here, the crowns will do more damage. So those crowns will get a bit of a buff. Now, here's the big swing. The armor itself is going to get its healing and shielding amp cut from 25% to 20%. And the healing from Queen, this is the thing that was keeping the 5 Fairy Rakan alive forever, cut from 12% to 5%. This is a big nerf. This should make Rakan actually eventually die, maybe. Now, to compensate, because we didn't want to kill this, it is getting 150 extra HP on the armor. A little bit of flat health, not bad. Radiant armor follows similar, but not nearly as big a nerf, because we don't really need to nerf 9 Fairy that much, but it gets 500 extra HP, loses 10% on the heal shielding amp, and only 5% on the healing Queen. So again, the goal here is you should hopefully see maybe some more 7 Fairies, but less 5 Fairy unkillable Rakans off a Callista 1. So yeah. And then Preserver, this is the other late game comp that you see a ton of. 3, 4, 5 Preservers, Morgana, Rakan, Bard, all that stuff. So Preserver getting a slight touchdown on both the HP and mana regen at 3, 4, and 5. 2 Preserver, still a solid splash. So yeah. And then Shapeshifter. Shapeshifter is another vertical that's been struggling. It's going to get a small buff here at the 4, the 6, and the 8. This is supposed to help champions like Nasus, Nasus, Nico, and Swain. So, yeah. Sugarcraft. Sugarcraft is getting a buff of all of its stats by about 10%. Goes from 20, 30, 35 to 22, 33, 36. And then the bigger buff, I think this is a pretty big buff, don't sleep on this one, is that if you're only running the 2-piece for a while, you're actually going to get 50% more sugar. So you can actually build those stacks earlier from the 2-piece and then go to the 4-piece. Or even, I've had pretty successful games where you're just running the 2-piece all game, and you can even make it to the final stack with just the 2-piece. So Sugarcraft should have some more options. This should help champs like Soraka, Jinx, Gwen, stuff like that. And yes, I'm sure people are going, Gwen, she doesn't need help. We'll get to And then Witchcraft. Witchcraft is in a weird spot, and then the 2-piece has secretly been very OP for a long time. Minus 120 flat health early game especially. Very, very, very good. But we wanted to like keep Witchcraft kind of power neutral. So we're nerfing the 2-piece. It's going down from 150 to 120. But the 4-piece is getting stronger, going from 4% bleed to 6% bleed. So Witchcraft should be stronger at 4. We've seen it do some pretty cool stuff. It works really well with the augment, by the way, the potions augment, where everyone bleeds out a lot and they last forever. So definitely some cool builds there you can try out. So, all right. And then on the traits small side, these are smaller changes that we don't think are going to change a lot, but are still important. They only hit 1 breakpoint. 5-piece Honeymancy is going to get a buff. We've seen 3-piece be quite good, 5 less so. So the damage amp per B is going to go up 1%. Hunter 4 is going to get a buff. Hunter 2 is fine. Hunter 6 is great. Hunter 4, not so much. 5% more AD. Multi-Striker 3, this trait has also been secretly very, very OP for a long time. It grants your team like plus 45% damage, which is bonkers for a 3-piece. So Multi-Striker 3 is getting lowered from 30 to 25. Also hits things like, the Callista comp in that regard. Pyro, the 2-piece, this hits like a Pyro Varus 2. You're already getting the Execute. You don't really need 10% attack speed as well. So Pyro is going to get nerfed from 10 per 5% at 2-piece. Scholar 4 is going to get 5 more AP. This should help you transition. We've seen 2 Scholar be good, 6 Scholar be good, 4, so 5 more AP there. Vanguard 4-piece, we've seen this fall out of favor. They're going to get 5% more shielding. The 6-piece is also going to get more DR. So right now it was 15%. It'll be 20%. Now do note with this one, in-game, the tooltip will still say 15%. We are aware of this bug. It is a text bug. It is still giving you 20%. It is just a tooltip bug. So the number's 20%. It says 15. You got to trust. Check your stats. It works fine. And then finally, 6 Warrior. 6 Warrior having 20% DR is a little much. It also was weird that Warrior had more DR than Vanguard. That's weird. So Warriors are going to lose 5% of their DR at the 6-piece. So 6 Warrior, a little less tanky. All right. On to champions. Elise. Elise is a champion. She does exist. She's not very good. Now she's going to heal more. Cool. She should be a better opener. Should help Eldridge as well. Jace. Jace has kind of fallen out of favor as well. He's going to get some more AD on his spell. Nothing crazy here. Just a small buff for Jace. Namzi is another one. Namzi, this should open up. We wanted Namzi reroll to be a playable thing. It hasn't quite delivered. So going to get 2 more AD back. And then if you can get 3 Dragon in, the spell is going to go all the way up to 600%. So this is a big upgrade for 3 Dragon Namzi. Definitely give that a try. Twitch. Twitch has secretly been a very, very good character. Does a lot of damage in the early game. We decided to nerf the fall off damage. So this is if you ult somebody and the first target got hit for 100. Before, the second target would get hit for 90. Now it'll be 80. So it's just going to nerf the fall off damage of Twitch's ult. So he's not getting as much free damage. And then Zoe. Zoe's another one here that has fallen off a little bit. So Zoe's going to get some small damage buffs. And then more importantly, if Zoe's missile will now retarget to the nearest living enemy if the target dies while it's in flight. This is supposed to help the Scholar builds so that Zoe can be a playable champion. Cool. All right, then we have the small side. Again, stuff that we don't think is going to change much, but still worth calling out. Ashe going to get a 10 mana buff. Ashe kind of, especially with the Multi-Striker 3 nerf, will end up a little weaker. So we want to make sure Ashe is compensated. Gets 10 mana off her spell. Blitzcrank has been really, really strong for a while. We don't want to nerf his ceiling, but man, when that shield lasts 6 seconds in the early game and you can't get through it, there's just no windows of killing him. It also standardizes him with basically every other shield in the game. So Blitzcrank's shield is going to be 4 seconds. Lilia is another champ that has generally fallen off. Not necessarily at 3-star, but as an opener, she's just not that good. So the 1-star is going to get a little bit more healing. 2-star is going to get a bit more healing. 3-star, plus 10. And again, this should help Fairy a little bit in the early game, especially with the armor nerfs and stuff like that. And then Poppy, same thing. Shield duration, kind of getting that standardized. Plus 1 whole second on that shield duration. Woo! And then we have Seraphine. Seraphine's getting a buff here. It's interesting that Twitch had only a 10% fall off and Seraphine had a 35% fall off. So Seraphine, again, hits the first target for 100. Second target would get hit for 65. Will now get hit for 70. So she'll be able to AoE a little bit better. And then Warwick. Warwick is very, very strong, especially if you have a Corrupted Vamp Scepter. He'll still be strong, especially with a Corrupted Vamp Scepter. But we're nerfing his peak a little bit. Very small amount here. So his peak won't be as good. But his opener, if you have him at 1 star, he might stay alive a little longer. So, yeah. All right, 2 cost. Ari, this champ's borderline unplayable right now. I mean, there's a couple people who've made it work in EU, but generally not very good. Going to give her a 10% buff to help her out. Just get her competing with everyone else. Kog'Maw. Kog'Maw's a weird one. Kog'Maw is like the ultimate top 4 champion. His top 4 rate is bonkers, but he never wins games, ever. It's basically like one of the lowest win rates we've ever had on a 2 cost. So trying to make changes here that shift that a bit, it's tricky because we can't just buff him because then he'd become really the ultimate top 4 machine. So we had to do some little bit of changes here. We're putting more power in his spell to see if that helps so that his spell could actually finish things off in the late game. So -2 AD, but spell goes down by 5 mana and hits for 20% more base on AD. It is a buff. It is a very tiny buff. You can't take a big swing here because, again, that top 4 rate is scary, but trying to help Kog'Maw a little. And then Syndra. Syndra is going to get a buff. Her damage numbers are now officially over where they were in the launch patch, but that just goes to show you how much that attack speed change we made in the first patch really affected her. So she's still not going to be great, I don't think, but this should at least get her more playable. If you like high roll her, maybe it works. But again, it's pretty interesting that like that cast speed change really made all the difference because our damage numbers are back here. So yeah. All right, on the small side, Akali, 10 mana buff. Kind of makes up for the early Pyro nerf because that's more targeted at like Varus than it is at Akali. It should help Akali cast more and be a bit more of a carry. Galio, the spell does flat damage reduction. It's not %DR, it's flat, which is a little weird. Trying to help early Vanguard, early Mage, make Galio actually feel kind of tanky. Neela, shield duration. Again, trying to standardize that a bit. And then Rumble 1 and 2. This is supposed to mostly help like Sugarcraft starts. Sugarcraft openers are really reliant on Rumble, and most of the time they don't roll for Rumble 3. But Rumble 1 and 2 should be a bit tankier during the spell. So, cool. All right, 3 cost. Hecarim. Still, Hecarim 3 if you can hit him, which is hard because Bastion is, or excuse me, Arcana is so contested. But he still has like the absolute highest cap in the game. So this is meant to nerf him. We're nerfing his base AD by 5, which is a pretty big nerf, but we're giving him a little bit back on the cleave just so that the cleave still feels pretty impactful, pretty minor. Again, meant to be a nerf. This is a nerf to Hecarim. Hui is another champion that has really struggled to make his place in the meta. He's just not very good. His animations are slow. We can't really speed up the animations right now, so we're just going to give him more power. So this is a pretty chunky buff. This is bigger than 10%, so we don't usually swing that hard, but this is another one of the big swings in the patch. Hui is going to be stronger, maybe help some of the blaster comps, but less Varus blaster and more Ezreal Hui blaster. So should maybe get that in there. Jinx, massive buff here. Not really. Tiny buff here. 2 more AD. Gonna let Jinx hit a little harder. 5 was too much though. 5 was a 10% buff. She doesn't need a 10% buff. Remember, she's also getting the Sugarcraft buff. So we went really light here. And this is what I'm talking about, guys. We're doing tiny changes. We're in the micro change place. This is not supposed to balance Thrash. Nico, even with the shapeshifter buffs, still kind of struggles to be a tank. At 3-star, just really not very good. Gonna let her cast more. Mana cost goes down by 15. Helps a little. Still think she struggles for the most part, but again, can't go crazy. All right, on the small side, Mordekaiser. Mordekaiser is getting buffed, nuffed, whatever. Shield's going to be higher, so he can be a little tankier. Shield will last longer. So, because again, his job is mostly to be a tank, but the damage amp per cast is going to go down. So he's not just going to be all of a sudden doing 5,000 damage because he's been stacking up. But again, mostly to help Eldridge be a little tankier. Synergizes well with Vanguard as well. Shields up longer. You get that Vanguard buff. Good stuff. Shen, shield duration, same thing, 4 seconds, lasts a little longer. Veigar. Veigar's weird because we buffed Mage, and Veigar is the one Mage who's already been quite successful. So we don't want to buff 3-star Veigar. That's incorrect. It kind of needs a nerf, to be honest. But Veigar won in the early game, kind of griefing, like actually pretty terrible. So Veigar is going to have some pretty weird spell scaling here. So Veigar is going to be the 1 star is buffed quite a bit, 2 stars buffed a little bit, and 3 stars actually nerfed. So, by the way, people are saying in Twitch chat, because I glanced over, Shen doesn't have a shield duration. This should say buff duration. He has a buff that gives himself DR. That buff duration has gone up. Sorry. So yeah, Veigar 3 nerfed. Overall, from what I've seen on PBE of all the mage problems, Veigar is actually in a good spot. So this seems to have been quite effective. Vex. Vex is getting a buff at 1 and 2 star, again, to help mages get there along the way. I will say this one has made me pretty nervous from my PBE testing. Vex looking really, really strong. So we'll keep an eye on that. But this, again, meant to help mages in the early game, because mages early game suck. They're really bad. And then Wukong. Wukong, kind of good early, but falls off a freaking cliff. So trying to give him a little bit of shield at 2 and a little bit more shield at 3 star so he can be playable just like he used to be. And generally, from what we've seen, seems pretty close. So, yeah. All right, 4 cost. Wow, look at all those 4 cost nerfs. We're ruining the 4 cost meta. It's going to be a reroll meta. Nah, JK. Varus does need a very slight nerf, though. And again, didn't even go the full 5 AD here. Didn't want to kill Varus. From what we've seen, he's still very good. But this is a very tiny nerf to Varus to hopefully help him. Yeah. On the small side, Fiora is getting the same thing, but because she's at 75, it's actually less of a nerf. It's a much less percent nerf, so Fiora very, very tiny. Gwen, same thing, just a really microscopic spell damage nerf, and it's only the base. Her snips still scale up just as much. So, yeah, again, really tiny nerfs to the 4 costs here. They should still all be just as strong. And then Nasus is actually getting a buff, so that should help things. Nasus getting some HP back on his spell steal, especially at 1 star. I think this is going to make 1 star Nasus again kind of that terror he was early on, where if you get him on like stage 2 and 3, he's just bonkers. But yeah. And then 5 cost, again, ruining the 5 cost meta here. We're actually buffing Camille. Camille is going to get buffed. Her spell and hookshot AD will do more damage. Again, so you'll notice kind of the trend of this patch here is buff some of those, 1, 2, and 3 costs that are struggling, not gut the 4 and 5 costs. So, yeah. And then here we have Briar getting a very slight nerf to her Ravenous bonus. Now it'll max out at 70 instead of 80. So Briar getting a tiny nerf. Milio 2, not really a big diff from Milio 1. So Milio 2 damage going to go up. Makes him kind of a beast and does help Scholar's endgame a lot. Milio 2 is quite good. And if you have Milio 2, maybe he'll give you some extra gold and items. The chance for that will go up. Cool. Nora. This is another one where we're trying to nerf the 1 star Nora, especially the Yumi side of things, and buff the 2 star. So 1 star Nora will heal a little less. 2 star will heal a little more. And then the AP and AD granted, which I think this was non-symmetrical because they wanted, like, the odds you were going to put it on an AD champ were lower, but it's very confusing, so they're just equal now. It's 3 and 6, so, yeah. And then poor Smolder. Poor Smolder, our silly rambunctious dragon that likes to fly into death and get himself killed and then do no more damage because he's dead. Well, at least we can give him some armor and MR on his scales so that maybe when he flies into the middle, he won't die as much. Yeah, poor Smolder. All right, items. There are some item changes. Blue buff. Blue buff is quite a bit better than Shojin. We do want it to be better than Shojin on like a 30 mana user, but maybe not 8% better. So we're going to lower that to 5%. You shouldn't feel bad if you end up with a Shojin on Karma. Right now you feel really bad. You'll feel a little less bad. Bramble Vest. This item sucks. 10 more armor. Will it be better? Yeah. Will it be amazing? Might need to do more, but it gets 10 more. Dragon's Claw, same thing. Kind of sucks. Gets 10 more MR. Cool. Crown Guard. This item has been overpowered for a while. You're going to get 10 less AP after the shield breaks. Crown Guard doesn't need to be as insane as it is. So Crown Guard almost gives as much AP as Death Cap. That's weird. Doesn't need that. And then Red Buff. This is another item where, which would you rather have on your Karma, Red Buff or Morello? The answer is Red Buff, which is weird and not good. Should be Morello, or at least close. So Red Buff is going to get nerfed, 3% less damage amp. So, yeah. And then one last change here, Unstable Treasure Chest. This item, a lot of the times what happens is you break it open, and then it flies towards the closest target who's at like 10% health and they die. And you don't get any items, and you're sad. So now it will be thrown to the highest percent health allies instead. So hopefully should land on like some backliners and take advantage of that and make Unstable Treasure Chest a little less troll. So, yeah. All right, augments. Augments, you're going to see a lot of nerfs. We're going to be trying to balance augments. We want to get to a world where there aren't any augments above like 4.2, at any stage. And so you're going to see a lot of nerfs here. Let's go through this. Precise planning. This is nerfed in the sense that you're not going to be getting 3 gold a turn from a silver augment, but buffed in the sense it's at least easier to activate. You only have to win by 4, or win or lose by 4 instead of 3. So that should be better. Risky moves, 3 less gold. Sag, I like that augment. Avenge the Fallen, the buff from 20 to 30 made it playable, which is great. Little too playable. So -2 to the stats. Not a big nerf. All right. And we're also at the point of the set where a lot of these crests are just really, really good, and we don't want to nerf the traits. We just want to nerf the augments. So Blaster Crest, no free Tristana. Chrono Crest, no free Zillion. Fairy Crest, no free Tristana. Frost Crest, no free Zillion. Honeymancer Crest, no free Nunu. Striker Crest, no free Cassidon. Portal Crest, no free Cassidon. Pyro Crest, no free Akali. These augments will be worse. Not a lot worse, but worse. And then Prize Fighter. The Prize Fighter buff worked. This augment went from unpickable to really, really good. So slight nerf. It's going to take a little longer to get those extra components. So Prize Fighter nerf. Continuing on. Eldridge got buffed a lot. I don't think we can have Eldridge be buffed a lot and School Mascot then give it 30% AP. That's kind of bonkers. So the AP gain from School Mascot's going to go down to 10%. That augment was actually doing pretty well despite Eldridge being weak. So don't want all the power in that augment. All right, Support Golem 1. This augment has been broken for a while. It's gone. We'll talk about Support Golem 2 in a minute. But Support Golem 1, it's gone. Unleash the Beast, another really strong augment. 10% less attack speed. Winter is Coming. This has been another really good augment. The way this works is, let's say your Frost Golems have 400 health. The Wolf has 130% of that, so 520. Now it'll just be the same. So this is a nerf to the health of that Frost Wolf. He'll be weaker. Witchcraft Crest no longer grants a Cassiopeia. And then Worth the Wait 1. This augment's really fun. Players really enjoy this augment, especially trying to go for a 4-star. But it's a bad augment, so we can buff it. So here, have 2 more copies. So cool. And then on the Prismatic side, same thing. A lot of these emblem ones are going to get nerfed. Blossoming Lotus real quick. Kind of a weak augment. We'll get 3% more crit. That should help it. But Blaster Crown, your Spear of Shojin is now a Tear of the Goddess. Chrono Crown, your Archangel Staff is now a needlessly large rod. Frost Crown, your Protector's Vow is now a Chain Vest. Your support, your champion goes from Swain to Zillion. Hard Commit, this one is getting buffed. Instead of getting the unit after Carousel, you'll get it at the start of stage. So this should help it get a little earlier. Should be fine. Honeymancer Crown, Gargoyle Stoneplate becomes Chain Vest. So that's weaker as well. Living Forge, 1 more turn per artifact. We're so glad people are finally enjoying artifacts. It seems like they finally turned on. People are enjoying them. But a lot of these artifact augments are now way too strong because people figured them out. So 1 less turn, no big deal. Multi-Striker Crown, Quicksilver becomes a glove. Portal Crown, Spear of Shojin becomes a tier. Pyro Crown, IE becomes a BF sword. Okay, Support Golem 2. This is the big nerf. This augment has been basically the best pick anywhere. Who cares what your board is? Take this augment. It's always amazing. This is a very large nerf. It will go from 2 support items to 1 support item. It's basically the equivalent of what the gold one was. It might be garbage for a little bit. Let's wait and see. We did buff the golems as well. But yeah, this was way too good, and we had to take a big swing here. We can't have every, competitive game decided by who got support golem too. So had to happen. We'll see where it's at. If we have to do more, we will. But even giving it like a normal item felt still too strong. So yeah. Tiniest Titan Plus gets 7 more gold. No big deal. Upward mobility, 1 less health per turn per level up. Not a big deal. What the Forge, another artifact augment. This one we're just giving it 50% less health per artifact. Still fun. You still get lots of artifacts. You still get that extra anvil. And then the last augment here, Worth the Wait 2. Another terrible augment here. But I think this augment's going to be quite good now. A lot of the 2 costs got buffed. And the correct play here is once you get your 3-star, you're getting 2 gold a turn. 2 gold a turn is great for a prismatic on top of everything else. So that's great. But if you really want to be silly, you can chase the 4-star 2 cost. So you can chase that. But 2 gold a turn should be good. All right, charms. As always, we're adding 3 new charms. But I do want to call out, this is the last batch. There are no more new charms coming after this. So charms, you've been fun. That's it. No more new charms. But here's the last 3. Combat Mastery, 2 gold. Next combat, gain 1 XP for each enemy your team kills. This doesn't appear in Hyper Roll. But so if you can kill, 7 enemies, 8 enemies, ends up being worth it. Golden Armor. For 1 gold, your units gain 50 HP for every 10 gold you have. So if you're sitting at 50 gold, 250 HP for teams, pretty good for 1 gold. And then kind of my favorite of the last batch is Scope Expansion. Your units in the back 2 rows gain +2 range. Pretty fun with Olaf, we've seen. But yeah, you get that. If you like that old scoped augment, there you go. All right, a couple minor adjustments here. Barrier is going to cost 1 less gold. It hasn't been as powerful as we've seen it. Judgment is going to cost 2 less gold. Chariot's going to cost 1 less gold. And the Moon is going to cost 2 more gold. So some slight adjustments there. And then finally, sorry, Hyper Roll players, Study Hard should not have been appearing in Hyper Roll. That caused a lot of issues. That is fixed. Study Hard will not appear in Hyper Roll. Sorry about that. For those of you playing the 5.5 revival, there are a couple small balance changes here. Vayne is getting buffed, a little more damage. Nocturne is getting buffed, some more attack speed if he hits 1 target. Draven's getting a pretty big buff. Poor Draven, the worst 4 cost. Rel is getting a slight nerf at 2-star. Viego 3 is getting buffed significantly. I won't spoil the surprise, but if you hit Viego 3 and went 5th with this, sorry about that. The team made some improvements to Viego. Skirmisher 10 gets buffed. And then all 3 versions of Pandora's items have been disabled. So, no Pandora's for you. And then finally, bug fixes. We fixed tooltips for What the Forge and Emblem Arcana variant to specify they work differently with any Tactician's item, not just Tactician's Crowns. Honeymancer bees no longer repeatedly fire if their target was shielded. This is a wild bug that was actually making Honeymancer better than intended against shielded targets. If the bees fired and hit a shielded target, they would just keep firing at 3 Honeymancer. It's one of the reasons why 3 Honeymancer looks so much better in the data. So expect 3 Honeymancer to actually be a little worse now. Fixed various issues with the Overachievers portal. So Overachievers should actually be playable now. The Shen augment, so many bugs with this thing, but no longer considers benched units when targeting. So Shen hero augment should be better. Fixed a bug where mages could have less starting mana than intended. That's another buff to mages. Fixed some mana interactions with 10 mage. Someone in my chat was talking about this. If you had like a blue buff on them or you got counterspelled, it would revert back. That all works now. 10 mage is still really, really strong. Torment of Souls Arena, center texture no longer disappears. Plot Holes of Redemption, we fixed an issue where it was healing a flat amount. The Road Not Traveled has been fixed. Augment Road Redemption automatically completing on first death. Fixed Forgotten, units visually losing their stacks when benched and returned to arena. And then fixed 1-cost hero augments on Dawn of Heroes not being uniquely offered in the augment phase. So there you go. Like I said, it's a patch that has a lot of changes if you count the number of changes, but I don't think it's actually going to wildly change things. A lot of the strong comps will still be strong. But hopefully more things are playable, right? Like Bastions should be playable. Some of those low-cost units should be able to come back. Mages certainly on the top of my radar. Like I said, if mages end up wildly broken, we will react very quickly. Could be another one of those even like day of patch micro patches. So I'll keep you updated, but definitely want to keep an eye on that. And yeah, but like this is where we're at in the set, right? You're not going to see giant reworks. You're not going to see crazy things like that. You're just going to see micro adjustments of 2 AD or 3 AD. So yeah, there you go. That's the patch. And like I said, we're getting close to the end. We're getting really close to the end, actually. Things are happening as the month goes on. So yeah, should be good. All right, that's going to do it for me. Hopefully you guys enjoy. Good luck on your climb as we wrap up the end of the set. And good luck to all the competitors who are going to be doing their like regionals and stuff like that as we come towards the end. And we'll see who makes worlds as we always do. So, all right, that's going to do it for me. Until next time, take it easy.